Hello, everyone. My name is Betty, and I'd like to share a personal story with you. My mother in law, Madison, wasn't always the superficial and self centered person she appears to be today. According to my husband, Edward, her transformation occurred later in life. Edward grew up in humble circumstances. His world changed drastically when he lost his father at the age of 5, leaving Madison to become the sole provider. Despite the challenges, she rose to the occasion, ensuring they had a stable, albeit modest, life. This resilience makes her current behavior even more striking. Through sheer determination and brilliance, Edward earned a full scholarship to medical school and eventually became a respected doctor. Despite his professional success, he remains grounded, a trait I deeply admire. However, Madison's lifestyle shifted dramatically after Edward's career took off. She embraced luxury, a far cry from the humble life they once shared. To give some context about myself, I am not currently employed, though I will explain why later. However, this does not mean I am financially unstable or reliant on others. Unfortunately, my first meeting with Madison got off to a rocky start due to her harsh misjudgment of my appearance and demeanor. When we met, her reaction was anything but welcoming. "Edward, is this the girl you've been excited about?" she questioned, scrutinizing me. "She looks so ordinary and unremarkable. Why her? Does she even work?" In that moment, Madison unfairly branded me as a potential gold digger, assuming I had ulterior motives for being with Edward. Her comments cut deeply, creating a tense dynamic from the start. Despite Edward's efforts to defend me, the encounter escalated into a heated argument. Eventually, we left, and during the drive home, Edward apologized for his mother's behavior. He admitted she had overstepped her boundaries and tried to reassure me. "She's changed," Edward explained. "She's not the person she used to be. Please don't take her words to heart." Although his words were comforting, the thought of maintaining a relationship with Madison felt daunting. However, as Edward's only remaining parent, I knew cutting ties completely wasn't a practical solution. "I'm not asking you to be friends with her," Edward said gently, "but could you try to be civil?" Reluctantly, I agreed to be respectful, though I doubted Madison would return the favor. "Don't worry, Betty," he reassured me. "If she steps out of line again, we'll reassess how we handle things. I love my mom, but I love you too, and I won't let her mistreat you." Even with Edward's support, I remained uneasy about my relationship with Madison. 4 years later, Edward and I got married in a simple courthouse ceremony, largely due to financial constraints. Edward was still supporting Madison, sending her a significant portion of his income each month for so-called emergencies. This practice continued after our marriage, putting the strain on our own finances. I never interfered with Edward's decision to support his mother, believing it was his right and responsibility. However, Madison's behavior became increasingly problematic. She often spoke negatively about me to her friends, spreading rumors that painted me as a gold digger. At first, I tried to ignore the slander, but it began to damage my reputation. Despite Edward's best efforts to mediate, Madison remained cold and distrustful. She was convinced I wasn't a suitable match for her son and treated me with disdain and suspicion. The ongoing tension made me question how long we could sustain this fragile family dynamic. Then, one day, Edward shared unexpected news. Madison wanted to invite me to a small gathering she was planning. Given her clear dislike for me, I was skeptical of her sudden change of heart. Edward, however, reassured me. "She wants to make amends," he said confidently. "She's trying to turn over a new leaf." Although I harbored doubts about Madison's intentions, I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. Edward was hopeful this could be a step toward repairing our strained relationship, and I wanted to approach the situation with an open mind. As the party date approached, I waited for more details from Madison with a mixture of eagerness and apprehension. Then the next day, Madison sent me a text. Assuming she was confirming the invitation, I opened it with cautious optimism. Her message began with a casual mention of the venue, a renowned 5-star hotel that was the talk of the town. She described the glamorous event she was hosting for 21 guests, proudly detailing how fabulous it would be. Feeling uncertain, I asked if I was still invited, based on what Edward had told me. Madison's response left me stunned. With an air of arrogance, she clarified that I was not invited. She emphasized the exclusivity of the event, the prestige of her guests, and her family's supposed wealth, making it clear that I wasn't part of her plans. I was humiliated and confused. Edward had been so sure she was extending an olive branch, yet here I was, excluded and belittled. Though hurt, I knew I had to maintain my composure. I calmly responded to Madison, explaining the misunderstanding, but her reply was patronizing. She suggested I couldn't possibly comprehend the complexities of organizing an event of such high caliber. Faced with her disdain, I chose to preserve my dignity, acknowledging her message without engaging further. After Madison's dismissive reply, I made it clear I had no interest in attending the gathering where I wasn't welcome. Rather than soften her tone, Madison doubled down, flaunting her supposed status and exclusivity. Though I felt a strong urge to respond in anger, I decided against it. Instead, I chose not to share the upsetting exchange with Edward and waited for the day of the party to pass. On the day of the event, Madison, seemingly oblivious to the emotional toll her words had caused, sent me a photo of herself and her friends dressed in lavish designer outfits. She later posted boastful updates on social media, highlighting the elegance of their evening. I ignored it all, focusing on my work and patiently waiting to see how things would unfold. About 2 hours later, I received an unexpected call from my father, which brought a surprising twist to the story. Here's something I hadn't shared widely. My father owns the very hotel where Madison was hosting her party, a fact she was unaware of. 4 years ago, I inherited a substantial sum from my grandfather, which I invested in my father's business. As a result, I now receive a share of the profits from the hotel and other family-owned enterprises. Despite my comfortable financial situation, I've always preferred to maintain a low profile, which is why Madison had no idea about my connection to the venue. My father's call revealed another layer of irony. Madison and her friends, oblivious to the high costs associated with such a luxurious venue, had racked up a bill of $4,000. After enjoying their extravagant evening, they requested a 60% discount, claiming they were short on cash. My father, aware of the situation and having heard complaints from staff about Madison's group being rude and entitled, sought my advice on how to handle it. As he described the scenario, I couldn't help but reflect on the irony. Madison, who had used the party to flaunt her supposed superiority, couldn't afford the event she had so proudly hosted. I shared my frustrations with my father, recounting how Madison had demeaned me while unknowingly hosting her event at my family's property. The situation felt like an unexpected poetic form of retribution for her earlier behavior. As my father and I discussed Madison's ostentatious display and the burdens she and her guests had placed on the staff, he fully grasped the irony of the moment. Together, we decided how to address the issue in a way that would both uphold the hotel's policies and serve as a quiet, meaningful lesson for Madison. Half-jokingly, I suggested to my dad that Madison and her entourage could make amends by washing dishes and cleaning the restaurant floors, considering their disrespectful behavior toward the staff. While the idea carried a hint of poetic justice, it also presented an opportunity to teach a lesson in humility and respect. My dad, amused by the suggestion, playfully added that if Madison escalated the matter, involving the authorities was always an option, though we hoped it wouldn't come to that. He chuckled at my suggestion, giving it an enthusiastic endorsement, and even joked about documenting the moment with photos. What started as a fan comment soon turned into reality. About an hour later, my dad sent me pictures of Madison and her friends, visibly humbled, washing dishes and mopping the restaurant floors. When Madison realized my dad was the owner of the hotel, her attitude initially shifted to one of relief, assuming her connection to him would get her out of the predicament. However, to her shock, my dad insisted she and her guests take responsibility for their actions. Temporarily dumbfounded, Madison protested, but my dad reminded her firmly that since she didn't consider me family, she couldn't expect familial courtesies either. The irony of the situation was undeniable. While part of me regretted not witnessing the scene in person, the photos were proof enough of the day's unexpected turn. Later that evening, Edward came home visibly unsettled. It was clear Madison had reached out to him, likely providing a skewed version of the events. He approached me with concern, asking about the claim that his mother had been forced to clean at the restaurant. I knew I needed to tread carefully, balancing my desire for vindication with the importance of preserving my relationship with Edward. Calmly, I explained the situation in full detail, emphasizing that what had happened was a natural consequence of Madison's behavior. I outlined how Madison had come to her family-owned hotel, racked up a $4,000 bill, claimed she could only pay $2,000, and harassed the staff throughout the event. Her ostentatious party had turned into an absolute nightmare for everyone involved, and my dad's actions were entirely justified. Edward, clearly stunned, asked about the details of the gathering, including the guests and what they had ordered. I explained that, contrary to what Madison had told him, she hadn't brought just 5 people, she had brought 21 guests who had indulged in the most expensive items on the menu. Edward was speechless. Madison had not only misled him about the guest list, but she had also lied about inviting me, claiming I had declined. The truth left him grappling with a mix of frustration and disbelief as the dynamics of the situation became clearer to him. I corrected Edward by showing him the text messages from Madison, which clearly demonstrated I was never genuinely invited to her event. At his request, I also provided the restaurant bills and shared the full text exchanges. To substantiate the costs further, my father sent him receipts, and I showed Edward photos of Madison's lavish party. As Edward reviewed the evidence, his initial disbelief turned to anger. Without hesitation, he called Madison to confront her about the glaring discrepancies in her story. Madison attempted to downplay the situation, claiming she had only mentioned being short on cash and accusing me of twisting the story to sabotage her. Edward wasn't buying it. He pointed out the inconsistencies between her words and the evidence and reminded her of the insult she had thrown my way, saying I wasn't classy enough to attend her event. Madison tried to dismiss her remark as a harmless joke, but Edward remained unconvinced. He pressed her on her irresponsible spending, especially since it was coming out of his pocket, and criticized her for insulting his wife while wasting money on her friends. Madison scrambled to justify her actions, but Edward's profound disappointment was unmistakable. "Mom," he said firmly, "I made a mistake by always giving you money whenever you needed it. But guess what? That ends now." Desperate, Madison protested. "Edward, you've been so supportive all this time. You can't just stop now. It was just a one-time mistake. Why are you overreacting?" "No, Mom," Edward retorted, his voice steady with resolve. "This isn't just a one-time mistake. If you can't even consider my wife as family, then I don't want anything to do with you. I always hoped you'd change your attitude, but you haven't. I'm not going to keep funding your lifestyle while you insult my wife and call her classless. This ends now." Edward didn't wait for a response. He hung up, blocked her number, and turned to me, his demeanor softening. He apologized profusely for doubting me initially and for not understanding the full extent of the situation sooner. I forgave him, appreciating that he had stood up for me when it mattered most. We had a serious discussion about Madison and decided that, for now, it was best to distance ourselves from her. Edward, though wealthy, remained humble and found his mother's behavior unacceptable. I agreed wholeheartedly, feeling both validated and relieved by his unwavering support. Together, we resolved to remove the negativity she brought into our lives. A few days later, the gravity of her actions began to dawn on Madison. Realizing she might have irreparably harmed her relationship with Edward, she panicked. However, the decision had been made. For us, it marked a new beginning, free from the strain and tension her presence had caused. With Edward ceasing financial support, Madison's lifestyle changed drastically. Accustomed to a high-end existence funded largely by Edward's generosity, she suddenly struggled to maintain her standard of living. Despite having a job, her earnings were insufficient to cover the opulent expenses she was used to. She eventually had to terminate her lease on her condo and move into a modest one-bedroom apartment, where budgeting for basic necessities became her new reality. Madison frequently emailed us about her financial difficulties, downplaying her past behavior and accusing us of overreacting. It was clear she wasn't ready to fully acknowledge her role in the estrangement. Meanwhile, Edward redirected his financial support toward my father's business, investing in the expansion of his hotel and restaurant ventures. We had aspirations to grow the business into larger cities, though those plans are still in the early stages. Amid these changes, life brought us unexpected joy. I discovered I was pregnant. Edward and I are thrilled and have been busy preparing for our new arrival. With a baby on the way, I'm relieved that our child will be shielded from the negativity Madison once brought into our lives. Should Madison ever wish to be part of our child's life, I am determined to ensure she does not impart any harmful influences. For now, we are focused on welcoming our child into a loving and stable environment, free from shallow or disruptive behavior. We appreciate any well wishes as we embark on this exciting journey of parenthood, determined to provide the best for our child.